Hello, I'm Kevin Fleck. I want to thank you for allowing me to do this video with you for you. This is for my class. This is in my final night of my cosmology class, and this is my final assignment. And so I just thank you for allowing me to present this to you and with you. Um, this class, what is cosmology? Well, cosmology basically looks at creation, evolution, creation, all those things that are the formation of life and how we all got here in that development. And I'll tell you that this class for me has been both it has been a challenge and fascinating, really, really fascinating. It has changed, I'll be honest, it has changed my views on a few things. And I'm grateful for it. I'm glad for it. I will share this with you. When I was, well, let me back up a second. Previous to class, where my views have changed a little bit, was I would have absolutely considered myself a young Earth creation. That's kind of the area that I would have fallen in, and I owe that in part to a guy I heard when I was a young man. I was in high school, and I had a good youth pastor, and the youth pastor he came and he brought a guy, had a guy speak one evening from NC State, a professor at NC State, and he presented arguments for young Earth creation and basically some arguments against evolution and the challenges of evolution. And I had never heard anybody intelligently argue that before. And it wasn't an intelligent argument. I don't agree with everything he said now. I looking back to things, I still think he made a lot of great points even looking back at it. And but I'm grateful to him because he finally said to me, science may not be anti-God. It may not be anti, things that we believe, the things we want, that are dear to our heart. Um, but there are challenges, right? There really are challenges. And let me say real quick, probably notice I got some numbers and things here. I'm going to come to these in a minute. I wrote these because I'm an old man and I got a horrible memory. And as you can already see, I can easily get off track on things and kind of wonder off a little bit. Um, and I will come to those. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of word, and you may see something else that I got here. This isn't an accident that I have this year. And, um, I'm going to use it to make a kind of help make a point a little bit later. We'll talk it a little bit. And as I present this stuff to you, talk to you a little bit about it. But anyway, my purpose tonight isn't to try and convince you really of anything. What I really want to share is kind of where my perspective is standing. Of course, some things have kind of spoken to me a bit. Maybe it'll speak to you. I hope it does. If it doesn't, it's not the end of my world. I'm okay. That's all right. It doesn't break my or your salvation or anything for that matter. So it's okay. I can handle our questions and our issues even. Um, but I do want to present to you just some thoughts. It's interesting. I was thinking about this and some of the challenges that even I had as I was thinking about this in preparation for tonight, or preparation for this. I had a story come to mind. It's interesting. When I was growing up, when I was a little guy, obviously, we didn't have the internet and everything, and movies and TV were much more regulated, and a lot of life was much more sanitized. And one of the things areas that was really sanitized, Disney was much more sanitized, still kind of sanitized, but it was much more so back then. And you come across stories, Disney stories, with Mickey Mouse and stuff. But there was also they came out with just from the most one, retelling of fairy tales. I think one of the first really movies in color, cartoon wise, may have been Snow White. But I remember as a kid, there was Snow White, it was a really short thing. But I remember a kid going to the movie theater and seeing the story of Cinderella. I remember as a kid seeing this stuff. It became probably that wasn't when it originally came out, but they bring it out during the summer for summer, a matinee stuff for children. Anyway, but when you see that, it's kind of you're seeing the story that we basically most of us kind of grew up with in regards to fairy tales. And of course, you have, Cinderella, and the story of this girl. Her father marries a woman who turns out to be very evil thing. A father passes away, leaves her with a evil stepmom and two evil stepsisters. They basically abuse her, make her the servant of the house. And of course, you know that what happens in that story is that she has a fairy godmother, and there's this big ball coming up or a party coming up at the castle. And the young prince is looking for a wife, and all the beautiful maidens are invited to be there. She can't go because the mother doesn't want her this beautiful thing to go there. She wants her daughter to marry this guy. And but as you know the story, of course, she does sneak out like a teenage would do. And she goes out and they with the help of the fairy godmother, she goes and she's in this beautiful dress and she has these glass shoes, these glass slippers. And but she had been given a warning by the fairy godmother, of course, that she had to run home before the stroke of midnight, or everything, her carriage could close, everything would turn back to the rags that she was in before, and she'd be a mess. And so she's here, midnight's coming. He's running home, and of course, like he's running, the prince is already fallen madly in love with her, but she's got to get away. And as she's running away, one of the slippers falls. And she, of course, gets away and gets back home. And the prince is devastated. All he has is this glass shoe. And of course, you watch the movie, it's fun. You can avoid some places trying to find the maiden with a perfect foot, with perfect shoe. And in the end, of course, he does find her and married happily ever after. Well, that's the version I grew up with, and maybe the version you're familiar with, but that's not the original version. In the original version of that story, when he is going looking for the young maid who has the foot that can fit in the glass shoe, the evil stepmother and her evil daughters try to come up with schemes that so their big feet can fit in there. The problem is they have these big ugly feet, and they won't fit. And so this, in the original story, it is graphic and gruesome. Cutting off the toes and talking about breaking the foot and trying to fit in the. I mean, it is just a ugly little story kind of when you look at the original of them trying to make the shoe fit. What does that have to do with all this stuff? Well, one of the things that kind of hit me as I was going through all this is that sometimes we do have a habit of trying to make the shoe fit the way things we want them to fit. And it can look really ugly, and it can be it's deceptive, just like with the mother and her daughter trying to be deceptive, it still doesn't fit. And sometimes we're self-deceptive in that how we want to look at things, and I've seen that, and it's not. You're probably thinking that I'm thinking specifically just towards evolution. Obviously, I'm Christian. I got to be anti that, but Christians we've done it too. One of the areas where we have um, real trouble looking at this glass cube is in one simple area, and that is in time. The time factor. I mentioned earlier that my views were previously kind of in line with um, young Earth view. My view. What does that view? What does that mean to say young Earth view? That basically is saying that Earth maybe that everything kind of began maybe mankind anyway been around only 6 to 10,000 years, 7 to 10,000 years maybe, you know. And of course, when you start looking, the problem with that, of course, is that you have to ignore a lot of stuff. You have to kind of play blind or come up with excuses or say we're just not reading it right. We're not reading the information correct in that. When I say reading correction, I mean reading nature, not reading fossil records. We're not looking at history as it plays out, and the evidence that we're seeing in nature and history indicate a lot longer than 7 to 10,000 years. It just doesn't fit very well. And that is a real problem. Part of the reason we get that is because we tend to, Christian, where's our basis? And our basis really comes from account in Genesis, the first, very first chapter, very first book of the Bible. And it gives the account of creation, how creation is laid out. And of course, it talks about the earth and creation and everything kind of being formed within this 6 day period. And if you look at those 6 days as 24-hour days, yeah, you don't have a whole lot of time. You really don't. If you're looking at it that way, you gotta, huh, you're looking at it that way. And a lot of us, I'll include myself in that, just, we're kind of in the mindset God can do whatever he wants to do, and that's the way it is. And so we just don't really try to challenge that, saying, yeah, okay, yes, I see that all this is around, I can't explain it, but God said it, I believe it, so it is, and that it's not a very satisfying answer for anybody when you want. It doesn't really create a very intelligent conversation. I will say, go ahead and throw this out there. I'm not trying to. My goal here is not to give you a biblical education on this. Just throwing this kind of explain where I am from, kind of where my background perspective on this is. I will say this. One of the nice things about this class is some strong stuff from other parts of the Bible to really start saying maybe that 6 days is not necessarily 24 hours. It's certainly not in the beginning, not necessarily not in that first part of that. Because you start seeing some things where other places in scripture that we can talk about later if you're interested in more kind of what the Bible has to say, kind of gives a fuller picture of that. Now there's scriptures talking about how God spreads out the heavens like a tent. Wow, what does that sound familiar? We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more later. And you start seeing the things that God laid out that may get into a little bit later. But again, I'm not trying to win you over to necessarily a scriptural view of things, but what you do, there is really some wonderful scriptures in there. Um, Job in the Psalms that start saying, oh wow, there's actually quite a bit more in there about all this. But we won't talk about that later. We can. What I want to share with you though, I want to kind of look at something else. I'll talk about that, trying to make the sheep fit, and I think time is an area, and that's an area where creationists I struggle with that, especially if you're going to stick with the young Earth view. That is a difficult shoe to fit, very difficult shoe to fit. It doesn't work very well. And be honest with you, it feels a little bit um, less than honest, if I can say that. Well intended, maybe honestly intended, but God has not called us to be blind. God has not called us to ignore. I mean, what's in nature? He created that. He created, and I'm assuming this anyway. They created everything, but if he created it, then he doesn't want to ignore it. I'll just say that. Um, so time is an issue, again for younger. But time is not just an issue for young Earth. Time is also an issue for the evolution. And it's a real issue there. Well, what do I mean by that? We have billions of years. Okay, kind of. One of the things that used to get me when I was younger, and I, been teaching, this stuff for a long time. One of the things that used to really get me was how it sounds like it always seemed like they were throwing out numbers about how long something took. You start hearing these millions upon millions of years, 100 million, 200 million years ago, and you're like, where are you getting this? Where is this stuff coming from? And it felt very haphazard. It felt like people were trying to make the shoe fit. And they were just kind of throwing out these numbers because, if you want to roll the dice, this is how long it takes for the dice to hit these numbers. And it always felt like, well, we got this carbon dating stuff. We got some other stuff that kind of goes into this. Okay. But boy, it sure does sound very random to me. It sounds very random. Well, one of the numbers I put up here is an interesting number. This is why I start saying that even evolutionists have a clock to contend with. And what do I mean by that? Estimates that we have great estimates that the Earth, not the Earth, excuse me, that the universe, you may have heard about this. We have this thing called the Big Bang. This is the Big Bang Theory. Well, from that, the estimate of the Earth, they get that basically the Earth is around some 13.7 billion years ago. But that's when all of this happened. Now, there's a lot of other things we can discuss about that. The one thing that becomes very clear is, well, where did that come from? Let me clear that first. Well, the idea of the Big Bang and the fact and this being the age is not random. Where we get this is from a name that you may be somewhat familiar with. Basically, a guy by the name of Hubble. through the Hubble telescope was named after. Now he wasn't using the Hubble telescope at the time. He was using another telescope, another for his. He died in like 1950s, but around that time though, he used another telescope, and he began to recognize something very interesting. He wasn't the first one to ever, he was the first one to really measure it. And what he began to notice, because of the new telescope, it was stronger than the old telescope. What he realized was, looking at this, he saw changes in the heavens. And what he realized was happening was that with the stronger telescope, he was actually looking, well, how does a stronger binoculars or telescope work? You see further. You see further. So what he noticed that he was seeing further, and when he was looking further, he was now seeing these same bodies of things, not here, but here in this other location. And he began to realize everything was truly in motion. Everybody, they kind of knew it was in motion, but he specifically became to prove now, or at least felt like he proved that the heavens, the earth, I mean, not the earth, well, earth included, but the stars were expanding. That the heavens were continuously expanding. Now, here's the thing: if they're expanding out, guess what? That means you can trace them here. And he was able to come up with measurements and start saying, we can now start putting kind of by the distance and by how far we're seeing and by the changes in distance of where we're seeing the stuff, we can start measuring the formation of everything. And basically, that's where the whole idea of this Big Bang is. That this really, if you just start tracing it all back, it goes back to this one area of things. There's a lot more details to that than what I'm giving you. And this is the old man's version, the watered down version. But basically, it all goes back because it's expanding from this point, and it all comes back to some things. Basically, we're looking at around 13.7 billion. I got the other number here, plus or minus 200 million. But we're looking at that kind of time frame and trying to measure this stuff. We're looking back, and so there's a give and take in that, but easily around that 13.7 plus or minus a little bit. And so we're looking at really a lot going on there around that change. Well, that gave us a clock now, because the universe may have been birthed 13.7 years, but not the Earth. The Earth came from that expansion, and from that, well, the Earth didn't form until some 4.54 billion years ago. Now it's a little bit, it's further out, so we can measure a little bit better. It's only plus or minus about 50 million. I know it sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but now what this does, I said this gave evolution gives them a little bit of a problem, because now we're down to a time frame that we're looking at here. At a minimum, when we're looking at the creation of life, we can't look any further than this. Well, we can't even use that as our calendar or the start date for creation of life, because when I say the Earth was formed at 4.54 plus or minus 50, plus or minus 50 million, the Earth was not what it is now. The fact of the matter is, what was the Earth like then? Man, it was a ball of fiery mud. It was this molten magma, just a round ball of molten magma. The fact of the matter is, I got another number down here. The Earth is 4.54. Well, our moon, a little bit younger, 4.46. Where did our moon come from? Well, basically, our moon, in essence, came out of the Earth. Well, how does that happen? Well, this thing was a liquid ball. It's bouncing around. And what happened, at probably about 4.54, it's forming, it's starting to cool a little bit. But then we have this period that's referred to as the late heavy bombardment. Late heavy, well, what does that mean? That means things are bouncing around. And at that point, what we're looking at what happened around 4.46 is that the Earth basically bounces into a smaller planet, kind of about in the same position as it. They're kind of hitting each other, and kind of like pinballs here. Another planet they named or called Theta, And out of that collision, man, you got the moon is basically blown out of the Earth. They had the mass coming out of the Earth. But now we wouldn't know it because the Earth was again a molten, and by the way, this bombardment, things might have been cooling a little bit, but with the bombardment, they heated back up again, really heated back in, and it became again a liquidy ball of this stuff forming out. Well, how do we know that the moon came out of the Earth? Very simple. We've got some Earth rocks up there that basically are this is their age. We're looking at that, we're seeing the age of these rocks up there, and that they're from Earth. In fact, they're not just any piece of Earth; they're from basically what our that's around our magma still, right? We got this crust here, and we're looking at this age difference here, and this stuff kind of forming that has now formed out there. Now, here's the thing: so at a minimum, we're looking at least 4.46 years. Because even then, it's still not quite ready for life, is it? Because, as I said, when these planets are bombarding, they're hitting each other and they're bouncing, hitting each other. It has man, that's a lot of energy. It has reheated up. In fact, the matter is that leads to another problem we have with the creation of life. It is so intense. It's a sterilizing event. Now, part of what kind of comes to mind for me in this is like when I go camping. All right. Now, don't know if you've done much camping, but there's one rule when you go camping that you don't break. There are many rules. There's one in particular that I'm thinking of in the moment that you don't break. And if you're camping out in the woods and you're hiking and you're traveling, one thing you just don't do is very simple. You don't drink the water unfiltered. You don't drink water unfiltered. Now, for us, that's a problem. Why? Because they're just drinking that water, right? And the issue there with that water, that life can make us really sick and kill us if it's something really bad. That's what we do. We go for life. I've gotten sick on the trail before for a variety of reasons. It wasn't drinking water. But you don't drink the water. You have to be very careful about that. That one thing to do, if you don't, even if you don't have a filter, nothing to do it. One of the things that we'll often do, and you'll see this in third world countries as well. You'll notice that before they'll drink water, use water for cooking or do it for other things, they do something very simple. They boil it. Why? To sterilize. To sterilize anything that might be in it. If you boil, cook the food, you always cook the food. Why? To sterilize. Kill anything that might be in it. Well, when we're talking about the earth and bombardment, it's a lot hotter than that. When you're making rock into liquid, you're talking about all metals are liquid, you're talking about something crazy hot there. It is a sterilizing event. And so what does that mean? Well, that means the ingredients for life will have a challenge existing. They're going to have now, of course, the thoughts are to come from carbohydrates, these things kind of come together in electricity. And there's a lot of theories floating about how things could form from nothing, basically. But that's the problem. Forming from nothing. Like this is just this wonderful thing of chance that this can happen every day. And some of these scientists, the way they talk about it, like, well, yeah, this happened or that happened. The problem is, how does that happen? How could that possibly have happened? In fact, one of the names I have put here on this board. Well, let me back up. I'm going to come back to his name here. So it's almost impossible for life to exist. And yet here is the crazy, crazy thing. At 3.8, maybe as early as 4.2 billion years, we have evidence in rock and shell formations of life. Now, that wouldn't be so surprising that they found something very simple. That's not what they found. When they find this, the oldest form of life, nothing that simple about it. It is amazingly complex. They told me, in fact, you look at this, it's an abundance. It is an explosion of life. It's not this little bitty trail that they expected to see where you can find all these hundreds of thousands of little steps becoming something. You see this explosion. And it's complex. What I mean by complex, I mean ecologies of life, the various forms of these life. We're talking about these lives are not this thing that's mutating all the time, but you're talking about these various forms of life that are able to reproduce themselves, replicate themselves. It is just that you have this explosion of life. That's a problem. Why? Because how do you go from that 4.6 when the world is a sterile thing, still kind of a liquid molten, to just within 4.2, suddenly this explosion of life? It doesn't fit in the time doesn't work. The time factor, because even at 4.6, the Earth still couldn't do it. It still couldn't produce it yet. It had to cool down. You had to have the Earth, basically, the solid Earth come out of the water, possibly earthquakes, volcanoes that probably afford that. However, it did it. But then it's still not there because the water is over salted, it's sterilized. You're talking about this environment that is unconducive to life. It is just the worst, it'd be like trying to camp inside a volcano. Not a good idea. It doesn't work. And yet life explodes. And it doesn't explode once. What you begin to see is that pattern of exploding, complex explosions. You're missing all the little stuff. You're missing all the little things that should be there in these explosions of life. Now, I mentioned this guy, Stanley Miller, the name I have written here. Now, it's interesting because one of the theories that was produced and held as how life forms is what they refer to as chemical evolution. There's another name of it. My mind is drawing a blank on it right now. But the basic principle of this is that when, basically, is that like somehow out of all this, there was a primordial pool of the chemicals of life. And that all it took was basically the lightning, electricity in the atmosphere, to lighten it up. I mean, it's like a Frankenstein. That's this idea that we can just create life from this stuff, that there are just little blocks that just kind of hang around together. And that if you just kind of pour these building blocks together and you got this lightning strike in it, there we go. We got this thing called life, the Franken life, I guess we call it. And so he had this basically he put together this thing that he thought he was proving life. He put together chemicals, how electricity ran through his environment. And he said, oh, look how this stuff has formed. The problem with his study was the chemicals he used, the things he did, it didn't exist yet. There weren't enough of these chemicals. They weren't around to have created life at this time. They weren't there. And so his experiment kind of went bust there because, and that was 40, by the way, that was some 70 years ago, 70 plus years ago. People have been trying to replicate that with the chemicals that were around at that time. And guess what? Can't do it. And that leads to again, another issue of the two just not fitting. Is that here it is, we want to talk about something happening we want to talk about something happening by accident, like this is just a natural thing and this is just a process and this is kind of folded together like that. And yet we who know how to manipulate and control, we have an idea of what chemicals are, we know how to pull them all together, we know how to run electricity through it, if that's what it was. And yet we can't do it on purpose, what we expect to happen by chance. And that's just phenomenal to me. And we think about that. In fact, I've written another name down. This guy by the name Fred Hoyle, a very well-known astrologist, and he put together an illustration of kind of explaining the real life. And by the way, he's not a Christian. He's got I guess an atheist. He's not a Christian. He has no plans of becoming one. He's an old man, so I guess time is short for him. But he gave this. He's honest enough to give this illustration about how the likelihood that this was by chance. And he says there's no way. He says, imagine if you would a blind have taken a blind man and given him a Rubik's Cube and hiring him try to solve this Rubik's. How long could he do it? Well, in his lifetime, probably never. Yeah. He said, well, now imagine he's really, really fast. He can do one turn a second, one turn per second. Let's say if this one guy could do one turn a second, the likelihood of what it would take him, if it were even going to happen at all, the odds of him doing it would be 67.5 million times the age of the Earth. That times the age of the Earth. What is he saying? He's saying there's not a snowball chance in hot places. That is just going to happen by chance because the math is not there. He said, well, he said, here's the thing. It's more likely that that blind man will solve that Rubik's Cube than it is for Hubble, for not Hubble, but Miller theory that life would just, all this stuff would kind of come together. The fact of the matter is, Miller theory is 293.5 times the age of the Earth, less likely to work than that blind man. The blind man at least has maybe a lottery ticket. Miller doesn't. The odds of the stuff are astronomical, is not even the word for it. And it's just not there. So we got these things that don't line up. And now, I thought I was kind of, I brought this in here for an illustration. And probably what I just shared with you is enough of an illustration, but I spent the money on this to use it. This is not my idea. I heard somebody years ago who made this illustration. I thought it really made a point for this. So I got this container of Lincoln Logs. I don't know if you ever played with Lincoln Logs, but when I was a little boy, I did. Anyway, anyway, so let me tell you, everything's in here. The whole pack is in here. All the pieces are in here. All the ingredients for this house are right in here. They're in this stuff all in one place. And better yet, they're all the right measurement. Everything's already been everything's pre-designed. Now let me ask you. Let's say I take this and I flip it over. Now, when I lift this can, what is the likelihood that I am going to see that house put together? The odds that I will see that house put together are more likely than the chance of life forming by accident. Well, Kevin, got this one time, maybe think, well, how many times? How many times would I have to do it? How many times would I have to do it? I think it'd be even maybe beyond the odds of that blind man trying to solve things. Well, Kevin, that's maybe thinking, Kevin, that's not, we're talking about life forming. Well, actually, here's the crazy thing. For the simplest form of life, this is simpler than the simplest form. For the simplest form of life, I thought I put the number down there, but I didn't. There are over 200 genetic markers, genetic pieces. The simplest form of what's life is very 2,200. You got to have all those. All we got 4 different measurements and some green pieces in this. And I think maybe red plastic. This is perfect. Here's the thing. With this, the pieces are actually here. With this, I'm here controlling. And yet, let's say I could do this. I could take this bucket, empty it out, refill it once every 5 seconds. When do you think it would ever look like that? One of the problems we have, and this is what I was talking about a little bit when I was saying it seemed to me it's kind of crazy that you'd always hear these massive numbers like we're trying to make something fit. The problem with the numbers when we're trying to make the sheaf fit is that those numbers assume we have a lottery ticket. If you think about this, we often probably have this idea, we get this idea in our head, especially, I lived in Florida for years. Well, we love the lottery down there. And we often get the idea, we see these, hundreds of thousands, millions, the odds of winning a lottery. Well, in the lottery, there is a ticket. There actually is a ticket to win. But when we're talking about the creation of life, the Earth was a ball of magma and there was no ticket. And then suddenly as soon as it's all there, but there was something there. I am convinced, and again, I'm not saying not, I guess I am. I'm not trying to, tell you that, man, life is amazing. And believe what you want. I'm okay. It doesn't pull the hairs on my chin if you don't believe in a creator like I do. I do believe that. I think it takes so much more faith than not believe that. So much that's all. Put all this together. It's just really fascinating. And I love it. I really do love that. And anyway, I hope this stuff blesses you a little bit. I don't want to take you any further. These are what I kind of some of the highlights I took out of this class and just how it had spoken to my heart and my imagination. And there's so much other stuff to talk about. I'm sure we start bringing up the topic of creation, evolution, and start looking at some of the other wonderful things too, and kind of what's all involved there. But let's say this real quick then before I do break off. And this is not to be preachy, but I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't at least say this. There is one thing that does kind of fit. The 24-hour day may not fit, but the pattern of Genesis absolutely fits. If this doesn't sound maybe a little familiar with you if you've ever read this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And the Spirit of God hovered over the water of the earth. Doesn't that sound familiar? And then God said, let there be light. Heaven wasn't been already light? Sure. But who could see it if everything is molten? In fact, I'll tell you an interesting thing. We're doing some working on them. And my floors, we've been sanding. I got this old hardwood house, almost 100 years old. Got this old hardwood. Well, I have been trying to sand these floors by hand myself. And I got to tell you, I never knew there could be so much dust in my life. I'm hardly touch that floor, man, and dust is everywhere. We have to kind of wash everything off and cover. Look at look dust, a light brown snowman, all the snow and stuff. So this your phone. You can't see anything when that dust is like that. That's one dusty room. You couldn't see anything. Anyway, but I wouldn't preach you. Here I am. Yeah, I hope you have a good. Thank you for letting me share this with you, and have a great night. Thank you.